I had never expected him to show up. My nephew, Jamie, had always been busy with his college life, lost in his own world. But that day, out of nowhere, I got a call from him, full of excitement and urgency. Aunt/uncle, I'm coming over. His voice was like a breath of fresh air, cutting through the fog of confusion and frustration that had settled in my life. I hadn't heard from him in months, and here he was, surprising me with a visit. As I stood there with the phone in my hand, I tried to gather myself. His visit was a blessing in disguise, I thought. Maybe it would distract me from what was going on in my life, the growing distance between my partner and me. Over the past few weeks, I couldn't ignore the subtle signs. Late nights, sudden mood shifts, and unexplained absences had become routine. My partner had become more distant, more secretive, and I wasn't naive enough to dismiss the unease that gnawed at me. But now Jamie was coming. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Part of me felt relief, like his visit could be a reprieve from the tension I'd been living with. Another part of me felt an unease, unsure of how to welcome him without spilling the emotional chaos I was trying to keep hidden. When Jamie arrived, it felt almost surreal. He stepped into the house with the same energy and enthusiasm that always defined him. I smiled, trying to push away my anxieties. It had been too long, and I was genuinely happy to see him. He looked so much older now, his youthful confidence shining through, yet there was a softness in his eyes that made me feel like time hadn't passed at all. We talked for hours, catching up on everything: his studies, his friends, his latest adventures. It was like the world outside didn't exist. It was just me and him, and for a moment, I could almost forget the doubts about my relationship. It was easy to get lost in his stories, to laugh at his jokes, and pretend that everything was okay. But as the evening wore on, the quiet presence of my partner in the background reminded me that I wasn't being entirely honest with myself. Still, there was a comfort in Jamie's visit. His presence was like a warm blanket, wrapping around me and shielding me from the cold reality I was avoiding. I found myself slowly letting go of the tension that had built up in me, at least for that brief time. As we sat together, the silence between Jamie and me didn't feel awkward. It felt safe. Maybe I was just craving that connection, something real and untainted by the confusion surrounding my partner. Later, when Jamie had gone to bed, I found myself standing alone in the living room, staring at the quiet house. My partner was in the other room, and the weight of the situation was starting to hit me again. The cracks in our relationship were no longer something I could ignore. How did it come to this? When had I stopped feeling like we were truly together? I looked at my phone, scrolling through messages I hadn't responded to. It wasn't just the distance in the house that bothered me. There was something more, an emotional distance that had only grown over time. And in that moment, I realized that Jamie's visit wasn't just a distraction. It was a wake-up call. I wasn't sure what it was going to lead to, but it was clear. I couldn't keep avoiding the truth forever. Jamie's unexpected visit reminded me of what I had been missing, the raw, unfiltered connection that I hadn't felt in a long time. The warmth and closeness that I used to take for granted had somehow slipped away, and it wasn't just with my partner. It had been missing from my own life, too. I was caught in the aftermath of a relationship that had once been full of promise, and now, I wasn't sure if I even recognized it anymore. Tomorrow, Jamie and I would talk more, but tonight I felt like I needed this time to think, to process. Maybe his presence wasn't just a random occurrence. Maybe it was the universe giving me a chance to pause and reassess where I stood. Where we stood. I glanced once more at my partner, who was still engrossed in their own world. I could see the walls they had built between us, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was fine. And I certainly didn't want Jamie to see any of it. Maybe it was time to face what was happening, not just with my partner, but with myself. I was starting to realize that I couldn't keep living in limbo, stuck between love and pain, pretending that things would magically get better. Jamie's visit had brought an unexpected clarity. It was time to face the truth. I spent the next few days in a strange mix of distraction and quiet dread. Jamie's presence was like a breath of fresh air, but there were moments when I couldn't ignore the tension gnawing at me. I had spent so long convincing myself that everything was fine, but now, with Jamie around, I couldn't escape the truth any longer. There was something deeply wrong with my relationship, and I was finally starting to face it. At first, Jamie was a welcome distraction. We went to the park, shared meals, talked about everything and nothing at all. His enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. I had almost forgotten how much I missed this, how much I missed feeling alive. But as the days went on, the cracks in my relationship became harder to ignore. I noticed little things. The way my partner's phone buzzed incessantly while we were together, and how they quickly glanced at it, turning it face down as though to hide it from view. The nervous energy in their voice whenever I asked about their day. It was becoming impossible to overlook the distance, even with Jamie filling the space with his presence. One evening, after dinner, I decided it was time to confront the situation. Jamie had gone to bed, and my partner and I were alone in the living room. The air between us felt thick, as though we were both avoiding something. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. "Are you seeing someone else?" I asked, my voice steady, but filled with a quiet urgency. The question hung in the air, like a weight neither of us could escape. My partner froze, their expression shifting into something unreadable. For a moment, they said nothing, and I could feel the blood rush to my head. I had spent so much time burying my doubts, convincing myself I was being paranoid, but now the truth was staring me in the face. This wasn't just a phase, it was real. The relationship I had once believed in was crumbling before my eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," my partner replied, their voice too calm, too rehearsed. I could hear the lie in their words, even if they didn't say it outright. My heart sank. It wasn't that I was surprised. Somewhere deep down, I had known this was coming. But hearing it spoken aloud felt like a blow to my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand more answers, but I couldn't. The truth was suffocating, and I could barely hold it together. "You've been distant," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "You're not the person I thought I knew anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. My partner shifted uncomfortably in their seat, but they didn't offer any explanation. I could see it in their eyes. They weren't ready to confess, but they weren't denying it either. It was as if they were waiting for me to make the next move, to decide whether I was willing to accept this new reality or walk away. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Part of me wanted to walk away, to break free from the suffocate. I woke up the next morning with a heavy heart. My nephew, but there was something different in the air. Had always been busy with his confrontation from last night still clung to me. But there was a new clarity. Out of nowhere, I wasn't going to let this define me anymore. Full of excitement, I had spent too long being consumed by the fear of losing something. I'm coming over. I wasn't even sure I still wanted. His voice was like a breath of fresh air. The pain of betrayal was cutting through the fog of confusion and frustration that had settled in my life. Jamie was in the kitchen. I hadn't heard from him in months. The simple act of him being here, surprising me with a visit. As I stood there with the phone in my hand, like a light in the midst of the storm. I tried to gather myself. His energy was a blessing in disguise, and for the first time in days, maybe it would distract me from what was going on in my life. He hadn't asked about what had happened the night before, but I knew he noticed the change. Over the past few weeks, maybe he could sense the shift ignore the subtle signs, even if he didn't fully understand it. Sudden mood shifts, together, laughing over small absences had become routine. About everything my partner had become more distant, as the day wore more secretive. My mind I wasn't naive enough to dismiss the unease that gnawed at me. The questions I'd asked myself, but now Jamie was coming. Resurfaced. I hadn't seen him in a while. Should I forgive my partner if they came clean? I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Could I rebuild what was broken? Part of me felt relief, or was it better to walk away? Like his visit could be a reprieve from the tension I wasn't ready to answer yet. Been living with. But I knew I couldn't ignore them much longer. Unease. Jamie was a good listener, of how to welcome him without sure I was ready to share everything with him. I was trying to keep hidden. Still, when there was a part of me that felt almost surreal. He had no judgment into the house, no expectations, same energy and enthusiasm. He simply listened. Always maybe that's what I needed. I smiled. Someone who could hear me without away my anxieties. It had been too long, allow me the space to figure out what I genuinely happy to see him. Later,
so much
as we
older
sat on
now,
the porch,
his youthful
the late
confidence
afternoon
shining
sun
through,
casting a
yet there was
warm
a
glow
softness
around
in
us
his eyes that made
Jamie
me
turned
feel
to me.
like time
You
hadn't
don't have
passed
to
at
say
all.
anything,
We
but
talked
if
for
you want to talk
hours,
about what's going
catching
on
up
with you,
on
I'm
everything,
here.
his studies,
The
his
simplicity of his
friends,
offer
his
hit me
latest
harder
adventures.
than I expected.
It was like the world
I
outside
hadn't realized
didn't
how much I had
exist.
been holding
It was
in,
just me
how much
and
I had
him.
kept to myself
And
in
for a
order
moment,
to protect my
I could
partner,
almost forget the
our
doubts about my relationship,
and even myself.
It was easy to
But
get
here
lost
was
in his
Jamie,
stories,
offering
to
no
laugh at his
solutions,
jokes,
just
and
space to
pretend
be
that
honest.
everything was okay.
I don't know what to do.
But as the evening wore
I
on,
admitted,
my
the
voice
quiet
barely
presence of my
above a
partner
whisper.
in the background
The words
reminded
felt
me that
raw,
I wasn't being
vulnerable.
entirely
I feel
honest
like
with
I've lost
myself.
myself.
Still, I don't even know
There
who
was a
I am
comfort
in all
in
of this
Jamie's
anymore.
visit.
His presence
He didn't
was like a
respond right
warm
away,
blanket,
just
wrapping
nodded,
around me
letting
and
the
shielding
silence
me
settle
from the
between
cold
us.
reality
It was
I
exactly what I
avoiding.
needed.
I found
I didn't
myself
need answers
slowly
right
letting
then.
go of the
I
tension
just
that had
needed
built up
someone
in
to
me,
acknowledge the
at
mess
least for
I
that
felt
brief
inside.
time. As
It
we
was
sat
as if
together,
Jamie's
the
presence
silence
allowed me
between
to be
Jamie
real
and
in a
me
way
didn't feel
I hadn't
awkward.
allowed myself
It
to be
felt
in
safe.
months.
Maybe
it
it
was
was
the
the safety
safety
of
of
his
his company,
connection, or
something
maybe it was
real
simply
and
that I knew
untainted
he
by the
wouldn't judge me
confusion
for feeling
surrounding my
broken.
partner.
I'm
Later,
scared.
when
I
Jamie had gone to
continued,
bed,
scared
I
of what
found
this
myself
means for
standing
me,
alone in
for
the living
us,
room
for the future.
staring at the
I don't know
quiet
if I'm
house.
strong enough to
My
walk
partner
away,
was in the
but
other room,
I don't know if I'm
and the
strong
weight
enough
of
to
the
stay
situation was
either.
starting to hit me again.
Jamie leaned back
The
in his
cracks
chair,
in our
a
relationship
thoughtful
were no
expression
longer
on his
something I
face.
could ignore.
I don't have all
How
the
did it come to
answers,
this?
he said slowly.
When had I stopped
but
feeling
I know
like
you don't
we
have
were
to go through
truly
this
together?
alone. I
You've
looked at my
always
phone,
been there for me,
scrolling
and
through
I want to be
messages
here for you.
I hadn't
No
responded
matter
to.
what you decide.
It wasn't just the distance
His words
in the
were
house
a
that bothered
lifeline.
me.
I
There
didn't
was
need
something
him to
more,
solve my
an
problems,
emotional distance
but
that
knowing
had
that I
only
wasn't
grown
alone in
over
this was a
time.
comfort.
And in
I
that
hadn't
moment,
realized I
I
craved.
realized that
The path
Jamie's
ahead
visit wasn't
seemed just a
uncertain,
distraction.
but for the
It
first
was a
time in a
wake-up
long
call.
time,
I wasn't
I
sure
felt
what
like
it
I
was
could
going to
navigate
lead
it.
to.
The
But it
truth
was
was,
clear.
I didn't know if I
couldn't
could
keep
forgive
avoiding
my
the truth
partner
for
for what
forever.
they had done.
Jamie's
The
unexpected
emotional
visit
betrayal
reminded
was one
me of
thing,
what I had been missing.
but the realization
The
that I
raw,
had ignored my own
unfiltered
needs
connection
for so
that I
long
hadn't
hurt
felt in a
even
long
more.
time.
It wasn't
The
just about
warmth and
infidelity
closeness that I used
it was
to
about
take
the
for
years
granted
of
had
neglecting
somehow
myself,
slipped away,
putting my
and
partner's
it wasn't
needs
just with
before
my
my
partner.
own.
It
I
had
had
been missing for my
sacrificed
own life
so
too.
much for the
I was
idea of
caught
our
in the
relationship,
aftermath of a
and
relationship
now I
that
wasn't
had
sure
once
if
been
I
full
had
of
anything
promise.
left to give.
And now,
Jamie's visit
I
had
wasn't sure
forced
if
me
I
to
even
confront
recognized
these
it
truths.
anymore.
I
Tomorrow,
had spent
Jamie
so
and I
long
would
burying
talk
my
more,
feelings,
but
trying
tonight
to keep
I
everything
felt like
together.
I needed this
But
time
now
to
I was
think,
forced to
to
look at the
process.
cracks in the
Maybe his
foundation of my
presence
life.
wasn't just a
My
random
partner's
occurrence.
infidelity was
Maybe
the
it was the
symptom of
universe
a
giving
much
me a
larger
chance
problem,
to pause and
one that I had
reassess
allowed to
where I
fester
stood
for far too
where
long.
we stood.
As the
I
evening
glanced
settled
once
in,
more at my
I
partner,
felt a shift
who was
within
still
me.
engrossed in
It
their own
wasn't
world.
sudden,
I
nor
could
was
see
it
the
a
walls that
dramatic
had built between
transformation,
us,
but
I
it
wasn't
was
sure how
something.
much longer
I could
keep
see a way
pretending
forward,
that everything was fine.
even if I wasn't sure
And
what
I
that looked
certainly
like.
didn't want Jamie
Maybe
to
it
see
meant
any
letting
of it.
go of what I
Maybe
thought
it was
my
time
life
to
was
face
supposed
what
to
was
be.
happening.
Maybe
not
it meant
just
accepting
with my
that the
partner, but
love
with
I had
myself.
invested in
I
wasn't
was starting
enough
to
save
realize
me.
that I couldn't
Not
keep living
anymore.
in limbo.
Jamie
Stuck
had given me
between
the space
love
to
and
think,
pain,
to feel,
pretending that
and
things would
to
magically
process.
get better.
His presence
Jamie's
was a
visit had
reminder
brought
that
an
I was still
unexpected
worthy
clarity.
of love
It was
and
time to
happiness.
face the truth.
I didn't have to
I
settle for
spent the
something
next
that
few
made me
days
feel
in a
small.
strange mix
I
of
could
distraction
choose something better
and quiet
something
dread.
real.
Jamie's
As I sat
presence
there,
was like a breath
watching
of
the
fresh
sky
air.
turn dark,
But there were moments
I realized
when
that
I
I
couldn't
wasn't
ignore the
looking for a
tension gnawing
solution
at me.
from anyone
I had
else.
spent so long
I was looking for
convincing
myself
that
that
everything
part
was
of
fine.
me I
But
had
now,
lost
with
in the
Jamie
years
around,
of giving more than I
couldn't
had.
escape the truth
I didn't
any
have to
longer.
fix everything at
There
once.
was something deeply
but
wrong
I knew
with
that
my
I had to start
relationship.
somewhere.
And
with
with
finally
Jamie by
starting
my
to face
side,
it, I
at
finally
first
felt ready to
Jamie
begin.
was a welcome
The
distraction.
days following that
We went to the
conversation
park,
with Jamie
shared
were a blur
meals,
of
talked about
reflection
everything
and
nothing
quiet
at all.
resolve. His
I
enthusiasm
spent a
was
lot of time
infectious,
alone,
and for
trying
the
to
first time in a
untangle my
long
emotions
while,
and figure
I
out
felt
what my
like
next
I
step
could
would be.
breathe.
The
I
weight
had
of the
almost
decision I had
forgotten
to make
how
was
much I missed
suffocating.
this,
But I
how
knew
much
I
I missed
couldn't keep
feeling
waiting
alive.
for things to change
But
on
as
their
the days
own.
went on,
I couldn't keep
the
pretending
cracks in my
that everything
relationship
was fine
became
when it wasn't.
harder to ignore.
I had to make a choice.
I noticed little things.
And the choice wasn't
the way
about
my
whether
partners
to confront my
buzzed
partner again
incessantly while
or
we
to
were
fix
together,
the relationship.
and how they quickly
It was about
glanced
whether
at it,
I could continue
turning it
living in the
face down
shadow
as
of
though to
someone
hide it
else's
from view.
betrayal.
The nervous
I thought
energy
about
in
the
their
years we
voice
had spent
whenever I
together,
asked about their
the
day.
memories we
It
had
was
built,
becoming impossible
and
to
how much I
overlook
had
the
invested in the
distance,
belief that
even
things
with
would get
Jamie
better.
filling the
But
space
now
with his
I
presence.
saw it all differently.
One evening,
I had been living
after
for
dinner,
someone else's
I
version
decided
of
it
love,
was time to
not my
confront
own.
the situation.
I knew I needed
Jamie
to
had
let
gone
go,
to bed, and
but
my
letting
partner
go wasn't
and
as
I were
simple as
alone
packing
in the
up
living room,
and walking away.
The air between
It
us
wasn't
felt
just about
thick,
the infidelity,
as though we were both
it was about
avoiding
reclaiming
something.
myself.
I couldn't
I had
take
to
it
stop
anymore.
hiding behind the
I needed
facade
answers.
of a relationship
Are you
that was
seeing
no
someone
longer
else?
serving me.
I asked.
It was time
to take
my voice
responsibility
steady,
for my
but
own
filled
happiness,
with a quiet
to
urgency.
stop waiting for someone else to
question
fix
hung
things.
in the air.
I
like
called
a
my
weight
partner that
neither
morning.
of us could escape.
My hands were shaking as I
partner
dialed the
froze,
number, their
but I
expression
wasn't nervous
shifting
about
into
what I was going to
something
say.
unreadable.
I had
For
already
a
made
moment,
up my mind.
They said nothing.
What I feared
and I
was
could
the
feel
aftermath,
the blood
the
rush to my
uncertainty
head of what would come
I had
next.
spent so much
Can we
time
talk?
burying my doubts.
I said when they
convincing
answered,
myself I
trying
was
to keep
being
my
paranoid.
voice steady. But
I
now
need
the
to be
truth was
honest about
staring
where
me in
I
the
am,
face.
where we
This
are.
wasn't just a phase.
We
it was
agreed to
real.
meet later that
The
day,
relationship
and I
I
spent
had
the
once
hours
believed
leading up to
in
that
was
moment
crumbling
in a
before my
quiet,
eyes.
anxious
I don't
state.
know what you're talking about.
I knew it would be
My
hard.
partner replied.
I didn't want to hurt
their voice
anyone,
too calm,
but I couldn't live a
rehearsed.
lie anymore.
I could hear the
longer
lie in their
I
words,
put it off, the more
even
I
if
was
they didn't
losing
say
of
it
myself.
outright.
My
When we
heart sank.
finally sat down
It
together,
wasn't that I was
didn't
surprised.
waste time.
Somewhere
I didn't want to
deep
drag it
down,
out any longer.
I had known this
I
was
can't
coming.
keep doing this.
But hearing it
I
spoken
said,
aloud felt
my
like
voice
a blow
firm
to my
but
chest.
not without a hint
I
of
wanted to
sadness.
scream, to
This isn't
demand more
working.
answers.
I
but
can't keep
I
pretending
couldn't.
everything is
The
fine
truth
when I
was
know it's
suffocating,
not.
and
The
I
trust
could barely
is gone,
hold it
and
together.
I don't think it's
You've
something
been
we
distant.
can rebuild.
I said.
There was a long
trying to steady
pause,
my breathing,
and I could see the
You're
hurt
not the
in my
person I
partner's
thought
eyes.
I knew anymore.
They hadn't
The
expected
silence
this.
that followed was
I don't
deafening.
think they fully
My
understood
partner
how far
shifted
gone things were
uncomfortably
until
in
that
their
moment.
seat. Maybe
But
they
they
thought
didn't
that if
offer
they
any
just avoided the
explanation.
topic long enough,
I could see it
I
in
would
their
let
eyes.
it slide. They weren't
But
ready
I
to
couldn't do it
confess.
anymore.
But they weren't
I don't want to keep
denying
hurting
it either.
myself. It was as
I
if they were
continued
waiting
my
for me
V.
to make the next move, to decide whether I was willing to accept this new reality or walk away. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Part of me wanted to walk away, to break free from the suffocate.